So here are most of the items I'm gonna eat during my week without including eating out. Some of those meals I'm gonna put together in a recipe that I'll create. There are other foods that I'm gonna be snacking on, like the yogurt with the nuts. There's also salad that I'm gonna make, so I'm gonna prepare everything aside or make salads the night of. And so now you might be wondering, how do I log all this stuff on MyFitnessPal? So let's go over different examples, different foods, so that you can understand how to log them as accurately as possible. Let's start with the easiest thing you can log on MyFitnessPal, like a bar like this. It's a 1 bar birthday cake flavor. And so what I would do is I would go on MyFitnessPal and simply type the items. So the brand is 1, so I would type 1, and then the flavor is birthday cake, and I type birthday cake. And sure enough, when I did that, the first thing that popped up was exactly that bar. Now, how do I know I have the right bar, right? We always want to double check. So what you'd have to do is look at the back and look at the nutrition facts. So when I click on the item on MyFitnessPal, I checked all of it. The calories were right, 220 for the bar. The fat was at 8 grams. The saturated fat was 6. Carbs were 23, protein was 20. Everything was written right. So I selected that bar and I logged it. Now you might be wondering, what if I find a bar and it's not on MyFitnessPal? I can find the right one. Well, the process would be to create a food. You can create any food you want. And
brand
it will
name,
ask you the brand
1
name.
description,
So we'll put 1.
protein bar serving size,
Then it'll ask
1
you
bar
what it
served
is. So
per
you'll
container,
put protein bar.
1.
And then I'll ask you the serving size. So if I look at the back again, my serving size, it says 1 bar. So I wrote 1 bar. And then it asks the servings per container. Well, there's only 1 container here. There's only 1 bar per container, so it's 1. And then it gets me to the next step where I put all the details, how much fat there is and all of it. So I would write everything I have available on the back of that bar on the nutrition facts. And once I created it, anytime I have that same bar, I just I just start typing the bar that I created, and it's the first one that's gonna pop up. It's gonna be super easy to record. Now let's look at another item like the pasta. What if this one is not on MyFitnessPal? I'm gonna create that food. Then I go through the same process, but then I realized that on the serving size, I'm not in a bar, right? This is in grams, right? It says it's 56 grams per servings, which is really important. We always want to work in grams. We don't want to avoid cups or pints or anything that talks about volume, okay? Because the thing is, if you could have a cup of pasta filled, but then in weighing maybe 56 grams, but what if you stacked that pasta in that same cup, right? That same volume, it would be heavier, so it wouldn't be the same thing. So we really want to go by the weight of the item. So I would create it 56 grams per serving, and on the side it says there's about 8 servings per container. Now if I want to be really precise and know exactly how many servings there are in the container, because it says about 8, I would divide the total weight at the front, 454, by the 56, and I would learn that there's 8.1 servings in that container, okay? And that's what I would write when I create the food. So now, how would I know how many serving sizes I'm having before I cook it? Well, I would have to weigh it using a scale. So that's the next step. So right over here, I have my kitchen scale that I'm turned on. And it's gonna offer me options to be in grams or ounces or milliliters. And I'm gonna select grams. I'm clicking over here on that button to be in grams. And I would put my bowl over here, and I would zero it out because I don't want the weight of the bowl. I want a dead weight. So now it says 0, and I can put my pasta. And if I want a serving size, I would put 56 grams of pasta in that bowl and then cook it. And I know that I have exactly 1 serving size, which is 200 calories. So I know that I'm gonna have 200 calories if I eat 56 grams of dry pasta, which is much different than 56 grams of cooked pasta, because cooked pasta will absorb the water and be way heavier. Now let's have a look at that different scenario where you might cook the whole bag of pasta, right? And you end up storing it in a container, right? Because you decided to meal prep the whole pasta and have it ready for when you want to eat. So how would you know how much you're having, right? Because when you cook pasta in water, it's going to become twice as heavy, if not a little bit more. And I know that by doing it multiple times and weighing it after. And so the thing you would have to do is realize that you cannot scoop cooked pasta, scoop 56 grams, which is a serving of the dry, and think it's the same as the dry serving, because it's not. It's actually twice as less as the dry serving because it's soaked water, right? So what you would need to do is, after cooking the whole container, you would need to weigh your whole pasta cooked to know how much it is. And to make it an easy example, if it weighed 1,000 grams after you cook it, and you end up eating 200 grams of that cooked pasta, then you know that you ate 1/5 of your whole container, right? But the thing is, 1/5 of the container is not a serving size, right? 1/8 of the container is a serving size. So what you can simply do, simple math here, is you divide 1/5 that you're eating by the serving size, 1/8. And you'll learn that, oh, okay, my 200 grams that I just ate is about 1.6 servings. So when I go in the app and I select my pasta, serving size is 56 grams, and on the servings that I had, I put 1.6, and it will let me know exactly how many calories that was, and I'll know it's gonna be about 350 or a little bit more, because 1.5 of 200 is already 150. Another challenge you might encounter is with a food that you buy in bulk, like this jasmine rice I bought. So how would I know? I don't have the nutrition facts. So at this point, there's a little bit of research to be done. First off, you can go on MyFitnessPal and click jasmine rice, and they have foods that have a green check mark. So typically those have been checked and they're correct. You would need to make sure that you're selecting the dry jasmine rice and not cooked, because they put both on the app. But the thing, again, if you want to be the most precise, you want to get the dry weight, because you don't know like how much water it's going to soak in that specific time. So to be as accurate as possible, we use the dry weight. And then even to be more sure that I picked the right item on MyFitnessPal, I would do a Google search, click what the nutrition facts are for dry jasmine rice, and make sure it kind of matches, or it's as close as possible. And if you do that, you did your due diligence, and you're probably going to have as accurate a selection as you can have. On that same note of food that will change weight when they're cooked, let's look at protein, chicken. Compared to the big difference with rice is, instead of gaining weight, typically chicken will lose weight once you cook it, because the water will come out and it'll become lighter. And that's why, again, it's so important that you weigh your chicken first. If you know exactly what you're gonna eat, you know, if you're gonna eat that specific chicken breast, you weigh it dry first, and then you know, okay, I got however many grams, and I recorded it correctly when I have it, right? And if I'm gonna make a recipe with the whole chicken, I'm gonna weigh the whole thing afterwards and do exactly what I did with the pasta to make sure that I'm recording it right and I'm using the nutrition facts that are in the back. Let's have a look at another item that might be difficult to log, like this sourdough bread that I buy from this Moms and Pops bakery. Basically, if the place that I get the sourdough bread from don't have the nutritional facts on their item, I'm just going to be left to guess. So again, it's going to take some research, finding out typically how many calories, what the nutrition facts are in sourdough bread generally, and then just taking your best bet and trying to select something that's in the ballpark of what sourdough breads are in. Or you can ask the people that are making it and see if you can get more details, but that's where it gets more tricky. So you just do the best you can. You try to find what typically the calories, the nutrition facts are in that type of bread, and that's how you're gonna have to go about it. So that brings me to eating out. That's one of those things that can be really challenging to track, right? That's why eating at home and preparing your own food makes it so much easier, because you pretty much know exactly what you're putting in your body. But for example, I like to eat acai bowls at this place next to where I work, and they don't have the nutrition facts on their site either. Now there's another company that does kind of the same acai bowls, the same ingredients and all that. And I did some research on Google, and I found their website, and they put the nutrition facts and all the information on their acai bowl. So what I did is I found one that looked pretty much like the ones I like to get at my place, and that's what I selected on the app. I found it on the app, the ones from the place that mentions their calories and all that stuff, and I select that one anytime I go to that place. And so that's what I would recommend to do if you were to eat out. There's places, for example, like BJ's, they have their whole menu, calories, and everything can be found on their website, right? So if MyFitnessPal doesn't have the items, you can create the food that you find on the BJ's website. Again, those are things that take time at the beginning, but if you consistently go to the same places or have the same types of food, then once you log them once, they'll be easy to pick back up, to find again on the app and to record. So as I mentioned in the intro, sometimes I'll create recipes, right, with several items that were on that table that I showed you earlier. So the app makes it easy again. You can create a recipe, and in that recipe, you would log all the items and how much of them you're having in that recipe. So it's important that you got the foods created if you need to create them, if you can find them on the app already, before you create that recipe, okay? Because you need to have everything easy to access on the app when you type it in, so that the items pop up and you can log them and put how much of them you're putting in that recipe. And so now you're wondering, like, what if you're meal prepping like me and you have enough for 5 meals? Well, again, when I'm done with the recipe, I'm gonna have to weigh the whole thing. Maybe I'll have them in several containers. I'll weigh all of it, and I'll know that the whole thing weighs, I don't know, 2,000 grams. And then if I'm eating, for example, 500 grams, which is a lot, right? A quarter of my whole recipe, if it's a big recipe, then I know I ate a quarter of all the calories that whole recipe is. And again, you go through all the steps on creating that on MyFitnessPal, but that's how you're gonna be the most accurate possible. There's something else I really wanna go over, and that's showing you how many calories are in each food and understanding what foods are very high in calories, especially if you're trying to lose weight, what foods you should be careful having, so that if you're eating out or anything like that, you understand why that certain foods might be an issue when you might have not thought they were an issue. So over here, I've laid out all of those different foods I have, and I've put the calories they're worth for 100 grams of each. So they all, I assume that they all weigh 100 grams and how many calories they have in 100 grams. And I'm gonna go over that with you. But before I do that, I wanna point out, for example, that this is 1 serving size of chips. And if I look at the bag, I'll know that a serving size of chips is 28 grams, which I weighed, and that's worth 150 calories. This small handful of chips here is 150 calories. So it already tells you that that's a food that's somewhat, I could say, dangerous, that you gotta be really aware of when you're having, because if you're just snacking out of the bag, you're gonna end up having a ton of calories, and losing weight's gonna be a real problem when it comes down to it. All right, so like I said, let's go over the foods, over the different foods that are on the table, and let's assume we have 100 grams. We have the same weight of each food, and let's see how many calories they have. First off, I'm gonna go over a couple that don't have any calories, like vinegar. So I use that, I put white vinegar in my salad dressing. I also put mustard in my salad dressing, 0 calories, so no chance of gaining weight with those. Now what I also put in my salad dressing is mayonnaise. And 100 grams of mayonnaise is 732 calories. That's a lot. Now, obviously, I'm not gonna put that much in my dressing, but even small amounts is a lot of calories. So you gotta be aware of that. High fatty foods, foods that have a lot of fat, will be calorically dense. That means there's gonna be a lot of calories in them. I know everybody's scared about the carbs, and we're gonna have carb examples too, foods that are mainly carbs. And you'll see that they can also have a lot of calories, but that's not always the case. Remember, your food can have carbs, fats, and protein in them, just in different amounts. Mayonnaise, that's basically all fat. Let's take another example of a food that's pretty high in fat and carbs, but mostly fat. Almonds. If I eat 100 grams of almonds, and that would be doable. That wouldn't feel like eating that much. Like, you could snack throughout the day of 100 grams of almonds, and you would have 579 calories from snacking on 100 grams of almonds. Another food that you might be surprised with how many calories is in there is an avocado. An avocado, 100 grams of avocado is 234 calories. This avocado I have here, this small size, medium size avocado, is more than 100 grams, just so you know. It's about 130 grams here. So something to keep in mind. And obviously, we're talking about the weight of the avocado without the seed in the center, okay, and without the shell, just the avocado itself. Okay, so it's gonna be a little bit over 100 with this one. And then let's look at vegetables, for example, salad, spinach, that's on the other hand a super low calorie food. 100 grams of this salad is 29 calories. That's nothing. And a lot of your green vegetables are going to be really low, or just vegetables in general, as long as you don't add butter and other things to season it, they're going to be low on calories. So again, broccoli, and you name it. Cauliflower, very low on calories. But then you add butters and oils. They're like mayonnaise, basically. They're super dense in calories. Like a tablespoon of oil is 100 calories. A tablespoon, that's not a lot. Same with the butter. A tablespoon is 100 calories typically. So it's very high. You gotta be aware of how much you're having. That doesn't mean you can't have it. You just gotta know how much you're having. Let's look at some different fruits. Okay, so 100 grams of blueberries will be 57 calories, which is fine. The strawberries will be only 31. So we know that the strawberries for the same amount are less. They probably have more water in them. Bananas, on the other hand, are going to be even higher than these two. I don't have the example here, but they're a little bit higher in calories. Other foods, tomato, that's basically all water. 18 calories for 100 grams. Onion, 40 calories. So very like in between the strawberries and the blueberries as far as how many calories for 100 grams. The carrot is pretty much the same thing as the onion, like 41 calories. So we've talked about a lot of high-fat foods with the mayo, avocado, the nuts. We've talked about some fruits and vegetables, which are mainly carbohydrate-dense food. That's what they have most of in them. And we realized that, okay, there's not that many calories, for example, in fruits for 100 grams. Now let's look at more other types of carbs that I like to call like complex carbs, or also healthy carbs like rice and potatoes. For example, the rice, if we took 100 grams dry, right? And typically, most of the time, you're not going to eat 100 grams dry rice because that's a lot. Once it gets cooked, it's going to be over 200 grams of rice, and a lot of people are not going to eat all that in one setting. But 100 grams of rice is 365 calories when it's dry, right? Now, if you take it cooked, it's probably going to weigh about twice as much. So it's going to be about a half. If you had 100 grams of cooked rice, you'd have about 180 calories. Still a lot more than the fruits, right? And the vegetables, absolutely. So you got to be more careful of how much you have, but they're still great to have in your diet. Potato is another great example. It's a vegetable, but it's also a higher calorie carb food. So for example, a sweet potato, 100 grams is 86 calories. A russet potato is 79 calories. So it's still higher than the strawberries and the blueberries that we had, or than the carrots and the onions, right? But it's still at a good place, and it's still a really good carb to have. The pasta, for example, is really similar to the rice. So for 100 grams, we're going to have 357 calories. Okay, actually going to be a little bit less calories, but it's more processed. So how does it sit in the body? You know, like what are the benefits from it? That's something to keep an eye on. And it's easier to eat more pasta, like a higher quantity of pasta than it is of rice typically. Unless, again, the rice is maybe flavored and it's fried and all that stuff. And we had the sourdough bread that I had earlier. That sourdough bread is 244 calories for 100 grams. Okay, so it's less than those. But again, I would think that you would want to look at 100 grams of cooked pasta, because that's typically what you're gonna eat. You're not gonna eat the 100 grams of dry because it's a lot. So yeah, just gives you an idea of how many calories are in certain foods and the ones you have to be careful with. And again, I would advise against to be careful with the high fatty foods, again, like the oils, the nuts, seeds, and some of the carbohydrates, like we talked about, the rice and the pasta. They can add up if you eat a lot of them. So all things to consider, right, if you're trying to get lean. Now, another thing I want to point out are meats. We didn't really talk about the meats. And here in front of me, I have my chicken and I have my pork. And what's interesting in those, they're really similar. If I look at how much protein they have, for here it's in ounces, but 4 ounces is 112 grams. So the pork has 24 grams of protein, and the chicken has 25. So chicken has a little bit more protein, which is nice. And also, if I look at the calories for the same amount, we have 190 grams of calories for the pork and only 130 for the chicken. So what that tells you is that, well, obviously the pork has more calories, and where does it come from if the protein's almost the same? Actually, the chicken has more protein but has less calories, and that is because the pork has more fat, right? So not all meats are equal, and that's also something to consider when you're picking protein, is to pick protein that is by protein I mean meat. When you pick meat, it's important to pick meat that has higher amounts of protein and less fat, right? Because if there's a lot of fat on it, it's gonna be a lot more calories. And also you should avoid those meats that have sugar added to it, because real meat doesn't have sugar unless it's added, right? If it's seasoned a certain way or put in a sauce or something like that, it's gonna have added sugars, and those you wanna avoid as much as possible, and just make your own flavorful meat, season it your way so you know what's in it. I hope this helps, and I'm always open to any suggestions, maybe things I can talk about as well, in addition to what I already did, so don't hesitate to let me know.